Okay, hello everyone. It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It's Wednesday, February the 19th, which means that it's finally time to get started with today's webinar on the topic of social selling and how B2B tech salespeople can succeed on LinkedIn. I'm just going to do a quick check here now. I can see some people are still dropping in. You should be able to see my screen and you should be able to see me and hear me, of course. If there's any issues with the sound or the video at any time, you can write in the chat function and let me know, and we'll see what we can do. Also, we're gonna do this webinar for some 30 minutes. After that, if you have time to stick around, I figure we're gonna do some Q&A. So already now or throughout the webinar, if you have any questions or things you want to find out more about, you should have a question field somewhere on your screen right now where you can type those in, and I'll do my best to answer them afterwards. Tomorrow or on Friday at the latest, you're also going to get an email from me with a recording of this webinar so that you can look back at it. You can share it with your colleagues, you can share it with your friends and your loved ones so they can all learn about the magic of social selling. Let's see if we can move on to the next slide here. Right, so I want to begin with explaining why we're having this webinar. I feel that there's a lot of content out there on the topic of social selling and LinkedIn, but I feel that a lot of it tends to describe it in a rather narrow fashion because you have to remember that these are very broad topics. Social selling is a broad subject and LinkedIn is a big platform with many different ways of working. So there is an issue, in my opinion, when people try to present it as something as simple as a tactic or a one-way process to use, or as a simple tool that you can, try out and suddenly you will have lots of clients that wants to give you money. It doesn't really work that way. It's more of a toolbox than a tool, and it's something that different people can use in different ways, completely different ways, and still achieve the same goal of reaching more potential clients. So this is also why I want to present the topic in this webinar more based on different personas that I've identified as social selling users, because a profile or a persona is something that makes it a bit easier to remember information. You can assign it to a name and an ID of a specific type. So it's a good way of making sure that you will remember this information and you can use it after the webinar to actually get started with social selling if you haven't already. Just to quickly go through us at Bright Vision before we continue. Bright Vision is a lead generation agency that is focused on helping B2B IT and tech companies with things like account-based marketing, outbound prospecting, and inbound marketing. And we do this mostly in the Nordics, Sweden, Norway, Finland, Denmark, but also throughout many other regions of Europe. So in addition to that, we also do workshops, we do educations, and we help out with change management in areas related to sales and marketing. For example, the topic of today, social selling. So if you or your company need help with social selling, how to get started with it, or if you need help with lead generation and overall want to discuss how to bring in more clients, let me know and we can set up a meeting about it. So first off, what types of results can we look for when it comes to social selling and LinkedIn? I use the classic sales funnel here. I put it on the side rather than in a vertical fashion. But from what you can see here, you can expect, for one thing, to get more leads to come into your top of funnel, more people who are relevant potential clients of yours who didn't know about your company before and who you didn't know about before. You didn't have them in your database. So you're going to see more of those come in. What you're also going to see is that you're going to get a higher conversion rate on your leads in each step of your sales process. So with successful and good social selling efforts, you can see more leads turn into business opportunities. You can see more business opportunities turn into proposals, and ultimately you can see more business proposals turn into paying customers. The third thing that you can expect from social selling, especially if you work a lot with content publishing, is that your current customers, who should be a big part of your connections on LinkedIn, will also take part of the content that you create and publish. And if you create good content, they will also perceive you in a better fashion. They will view you as thought leaders and experts in your area, in the areas that you work in, which should increase the likelihood that they will stick around and keep purchasing products or services from you rather than look for a competitor. So you can see improvements in your results in each part of the sales process and with your current clients. Regarding numbers, actual metrics on this, that's a harder question to answer. There are so many variables in place, so it's difficult to say whether you will be able to expect 5 or 50% increase of leads or any other figure. So we leave that out of it for now. That's a different webinar in itself. So the personas then, we have them on the screen here. It's the ghost, the rock star, the detective, and the superhero. And later on, we'll go through them one by one. But just to go through them briefly, when we have them all on the screen here, we all start out to the left as a ghost. And you know, a real ghost, if you believe in those, they rarely show themselves to anyone, and they tend to drift around without any real plan or idea on what they should do. And it's the same thing with LinkedIn. A ghost is a person who's not really active. They might have a profile set up. They might log in a couple of times every day, but mostly to read what others have published rather than make any contributions of their own. They might do some research, but mostly just look at a person's profile before they're going to have a sales meeting with them. So not very active at all. And again, this is where most people start out, but it's also in fact where most people, even in sales, will find themselves today, because few people manage to scale up and use LinkedIn in a strategic way to boost their sales on the level of a rock star or a detective. But if we move on to the detective, let's start with the rock star. If we move on to the rock star, like a real rock star who stands on the stage, singing their music, singing their lyrics to a large group of people, the rock star of LinkedIn is someone who has this amazing ability to always publish new and insightful content on a news feed for everyone to read. So this is, you know, who we all have in mind when we think about successful social selling, because these are the types of people who show themselves a lot. It's people who create engaging content that people interact with, and they can use those interactions to build relationships. They can turn those relationships into meetings, into proposals, and ultimately new clients. So it's a really good way of working with social selling, but one that many people struggle with because they find it a bit intimidating, trying to find out how to find the time and the ideas to use for engaging content. So we're going to spend some time on that later on. The alternative to the rockstar, and this goes back to what I mentioned before, that LinkedIn is a broad platform. It can be used in many different ways. So an alternative to that is what I call the detective. And as a real detective, or at least a movie detective, they work a lot in the background. They might speak a lot one-to-one with people, but they don't stand on a stage for everyone to see. They work a lot with making research, trying to find out information that they can use in their pursuit of whatever it is. So in terms of social selling, these are people who use Sales Navigator, who makes research on people's profiles and try to build connections between people to really understand what buttons they should push in each step of the sales process. So they use LinkedIn more as a tool in connection with what they do in other channels as well. They use that information when they send emails, when they do calls, and when they have meetings with people. So a bit different approach. The superhero to the right is a profile who has this almost supernatural ability to work successfully both as a detective and as a rock star. So this is really not often a person who works in complex sales. This is more often a speaker or a one-man consultant who has a bit of a simpler sales process, so they can afford to put the time needed into LinkedIn and social selling to make both of these personas work at the same time. And since it's a persona that's not really relevant to pursue for someone in complex sales, and since their methodology is already covered in what we're gonna discuss about the detective and the rockstar, we're not gonna speak more about the superhero persona later on in this webinar. So from here on, we're going to leave it at the ghost, the rockstar, and the detective. So starting with the ghost then, where most of us will find ourselves when it comes to social selling. What you need to understand, first of all, is that it's okay to stay at this level. You don't have to become a successful social seller now in 2020. There are thousands, if not millions, of salespeople who are able to accomplish large budgets, large sales without even having a LinkedIn profile set up at all. So it might be different in 5 years or so. I think it's moving more in the direction that you need social selling in your day-to-day work, but we're not there yet. So you don't need to listen to those that say that you're missing out on something if you're not already started with this. You can be a bit more relaxed with it. So even if you want to stay in this role, I want to give a couple of things as advice so that you can still maximize your chances of turning your social presence into leads. And one of the things to remember is that even now you should start doing connections with people that you know or have some form of relationship or interaction with. Because let's say in a couple of years that you want to get started with social selling, it's really difficult to get any scale on it if you only have like 30 connections. So keep building connections with everyone that you speak with, especially if they are part of your target group. The other thing to keep in mind is that you should spend a couple of hours of making your profile page look good. Because even if you don't work with social selling, you might have potential clients who are interested in you and wants to look you up before you have a sales meeting. And if your profile looks like the one on the left here, and your competitors who are gonna meet the same person have profiles that look more like the one to the right, you're not gonna lose the sale then and there, but you're gonna have a bit of an uphill battle because your competitors have already been able to start build their trust with this person without even interacting with them in any other way than having them come and look at their profile. So spend some time on this. It's a one-time thing. Then you just need to make some small adjustments if you have a new role or if you change companies, but spend that time now so that you have it in place. Also, I know many people ask about this and how to create a good profile, so we're gonna spend a few minutes on that. I'm not gonna cover everything on the screen here, so you can look back at it in the recording afterwards. But looking at your profile page, or rather your profile picture, make sure that it's high resolution. Make sure that it's zoomed in on your face so that you don't have a half body or full body shot, because especially on a phone, that picture is going to be really small as it is. So you don't need to make it worse for yourself. Also, for the same reason, try to make it pop out from the background a bit and try to look happy. Try to smile. If you're like me, if you don't know how to smile, you can fake it till you make it, right? So try and make it look good. Get some feedback from your colleagues and your family, people who can be honest with you what they think about it. Then if we look at your name and your what's called your headline, I see a couple of trends here over the years. One of them is that people have started to use symbols or icons more in their headline and name, and they will tell you that it makes you stand out a bit in a crowd. I'm not really of that opinion, but it's not more scientific than that. I just don't think it looks good. So my advice, if you don't know what you're doing, would be to leave it out of your name and headline for the time being. Also, we've seen a change in recent years where people tend to have more of a vivid description of what they do rather than just their title and their company like everyone had before. And I think this is good. I use it myself, as you can see, trying to make a description of what I do, but I tend to not be too broad, and I tend not to be too niche either. I feel that many people are so broad in their description that they help companies accomplish digitalization, or they help people with IT. I think they become so broad that there's no point to it. So try and find something that's a bit more narrow. You don't have to be afraid that you're leaving people outside of it, but try and think about your main target group and how you can speak directly with them already in your headline. Because if you do that, you're going to maximize your chances of getting people to look at your profile. They're going to click on it. And when they do, they get to your About section. And in the About section, you're job should be to get them to get in touch with you or connect with you. You can do that by writing in a few different things. You shouldn't make it longer than what I have on the screen right now, but you should try and find some information there or write some information there about what you can help out with as a company. You should try and find something where you talk about a challenge you want to overcome or a story that you might have about why you work with what you do, because those things make it easier to remember you. And lastly, you should try and speak directly to the roles that are relevant for you to sell towards. Try to speak with them in their language about topics that are relevant to them. Other than the About section, everything below that, recommendations, your resume and so on, people will tell you that that is also important. I don't think so. Not from a sales perspective, a bit more if you want to be recruited somewhere. But in terms of sales, this is as far as most people will go. They will read your About section and determine if they want to connect with you or not. So spend some time on that. Moving on to the detective then, the profile that is more focused on information gathering and information utilization. What you really should do in that role is that you should become an expert in Sales Navigator. And if you don't know about Sales Navigator, if you haven't used it before, it's a different part of LinkedIn with its own user interface that looks completely different. And it's tailored around the idea of making searches on leads or people and companies, and that you can save those searches to go back to them whenever you want to. And most of all, be able to you can save them so that you can get updates on a weekly or daily basis about new people that become part of those target groups. So it's a really good way of making sure that you always know what's happening with your potential leads and prospects and what's happening between companies that you want to pursue. So if you haven't used it, it's always free for the first 30 days. So try and activate it when you feel that you have a few weeks or up to a month where you can really try and use it and learn it and see if it's something for you, because it's not for everyone. If you want to learn more about it, we don't have time to demonstrate it right here on the webinar, but there are many good videos on YouTube that you can try out. If you can't find any, write to me, because I have a few saved that I think are really good in explaining the system. And when you start working with it, a couple of advices on searches that you can do and save that I use myself. One of them is that I have a save on all my connections who have switched jobs or companies within the last 90 days. Because for me, and I think for most people, that's a really good trigger that you should utilize to try and sell more things to them. And this is something that you will get updated about in the regular LinkedIn login as well, but it's easy to miss those, and people can choose not to have it published there when they change roles. So in order to make sure that you don't miss out on any of them, you need to use that search function in Sales Navigator. The other one I use is that I have a search that I have saved, which is on people who have started to work at the companies that we have as clients at Bright Vision. So whenever someone starts working in a sales or marketing role of a specific seniority level in those companies, I know that, and I can contact them and make sure that we can be a part in describing for them what it is we help them with. Because many times when people join a company, they might have an idea on which suppliers or vendors they should bring in from their previous employments. And I want to be there early on to prevent that from happening. By the way, after the first 30 days, it's a pay-to-play model. So it's about $50 per month to use per user. So after those first 30 days, you're going to have to speak with your sales manager if you want to keep that login and be able to use it going forward. So try and make a really good evaluation of it in those first days so that you know if you want to use it or not. Another interesting thing that you can do in the role of a detective, which I do from time to time, is that say I have a meeting with someone. Let's say I have a meeting with the person here in the middle. Her name is Christine. Let's say that I speak with her about our services, and she says that she's going to bring it up with her colleagues in an internal meeting. Then I try to find out when is that internal meeting going to take place and who's going to be a part of it. Usually I get an answer to when it's going to take place. They tell me that it's next Friday or so. I don't always get the names of the people who will participate, but I can often figure out and do some Sales Navigator searches and find out on my own. And I can use that information and start with, if we look at 2 to 3 days before their meeting will take place, I can make some slight adjustments to my headline on LinkedIn. Like you can see here, I can switch from the one I have on the left to the one on the right, which should be a description that really fits with the company that I want to sell towards. Because what I do after that is that 2 days before their meeting, I start to twice a day go into their profiles so that they can get a notification that I have looked at their profile. I do that up until the day of their meeting. And this doesn't really take more than a minute to do if I have their profiles open in a separate browser. It goes really quickly. Because what's going to happen then, in my experience, is that based on everyone's profile that I go to, about 75% of them will one of those days see that I have visited their profile, and they're going to remember my name if it's mentioned in the meeting. Almost half of them will visit my profile, and even 1 in 10 will connect with me, even though I haven't done anything other than just gone to their profile and looked at them. And I use this because board meetings or management meetings like this, where the participants are going to choose between different vendors, they are not always very scientific in their setup. Often decisions are based on whatever people feel comfortable with. And if I have made a good impression by going to their profile and they have looked at my profile, that in combination with my contact describing us next to our competitors might be the only little extra push that I need to get ahead of my competitors. So this is something that's quite interesting and quite simple to try out. And it gets even better results if you are several people in your sales department who can help out with this and go into this person's profile to get more of an interaction with them. Of course, it's always best to get these people on the phone or email with them or speak with them, but there are scenarios where that's not really possible for different reasons. For example, if it's a RFP where you're not really allowed to speak with anyone but your main point of contact, then this is a second way of still making contact with more people even though you cannot speak with them directly. So try this out. Before we go into the rockstar persona, I just want to quickly mention as well that in order to make this happen at scale, you really need support from management. So if you're in a sales role, try and speak with your head of sales and see if you can make a strategic effort around social selling, because the work that I mentioned so far and the work of a rock star, it takes time, and you need licenses for Sales Navigator. You need to be able to share ideas with each other. You might have metrics associated with social selling that you want to use, and you might want to scale down on other things like event participation and such to really get the time to try this out. So speak with management. Then if we look at the rockstar, the content creator persona of LinkedIn, there are a couple of things that I mentioned before that people perceive as challenges to get started with this. So my advice here is that, for one thing, you should try and use the time you already spend each week on research, on learning things. You should try and spend that time to also find ideas for your next content piece. And my thinking here is that if you work in complex sales, you should already be doing research a couple of hours every week at least on the topics that you sell in regards to. Because complex sales nowadays, they expect you to be able to act as a thought leader or someone who's really knowledgeable in your field of expertise. And you should also make research about the industries that you sell towards, because you need to understand the reality that your prospects work in. And if you don't already do that research on a weekly basis, I think you have bigger challenges to address than just your social selling efforts, because you need to stay on top of all that information that's happening out there, because your competitors are for sure doing that already. So spend that time each week to find out about what's happening in your field. And if you do that, and if you worked in that area for a number of years, you can use your insights, you can use your gathered wisdom in combination with new insights to make really interesting content. If you have really little time, you can still find interesting articles that you can share on the LinkedIn feed, as long as you just spend a few minutes to try and add some insight of your own, why people should look at this content. If you don't do that, if you only push out content from other places without making any contributions of your own, you will not be viewed as an expert. You will be viewed more as a content aggregator who doesn't build any trust with anyone. So another bonus of thinking this way, another bonus of using that research to create content, is that all studies show that the best way to remember information is by teaching it to someone else as well. So use that time, you will get twice as much out of it as you did before. The other thing to keep in mind is that you need to tailor content towards the different stages of the buyer's journey. And the buyer's journey, which you can see here, it kind of looks like the sales funnel, because it is like the sales funnel, but more from a client's perspective. The idea here is that anyone who makes a purchase, especially a larger purchase, will go through a buyer's process where they go through 3 stages. In the first stage, why, they will realize that they have a challenge, a problem, or an opportunity that they need to handle some way. In the next step, they will understand that challenge, and now they are looking at ways to handling it. And in the last step, they've decided on a specific way of handling their challenge, and now they are looking at different vendors, different suppliers who can help them with this specific solution that they want. And the issue I see here is that most of the content that people publish, most sellers public, is content who fits in this last stage, where it's fit with those that look for a specific vendor. You know, things like customer cases or product demos or bragging about winning an award. The problem here is that there are only so few people at any point in time who are in this stage, who are actively looking at different vendors for their solution. Software sales, for example, you change those things once every 10 years nowadays. So only a fraction of people on LinkedIn will be in this stage. So you need to speak with those who are in the earlier stages of the sales process as well, because you have many more people here, people who want to find out about general insights that relate to their area of operations. They want someone who can give them good, interesting insights rather than someone who can just show them that they have a new customer case on their website. Because again, no one is really interested in that, especially not in those early stages. Another bonus of operating in these early stages with content geared towards why and how people is that you want to start building relationships with people in these early parts of their buyer's journey. You want to build a relationship long before they even know that they need to consider the types of solutions that you and your company provide. Because in a few years' time, if you have frequently pushed out interesting information to them that they've learned from, when it's time for them to actually pick a supplier, they're gonna pick you rather than someone who's just been busy publishing late stage content over and over again. So for several reasons, try and act based on the buyer's journey. And it's a subject that we could do a webinar on its own one day, because it's a big and interesting area to consider. Last of all, here I want you to remember that, or I want you to recognize that if all us who work in sales only keep pushing late stage content about customer cases or about how good we are, if that's all that fills up people's news feeds on LinkedIn, I think over time people will lose interest in LinkedIn and stop going there, because people want to learn, they are interested, they are curious, they don't want to hear about things relevant to those who pick a supplier. So keep this in mind, because otherwise we might not have a good LinkedIn feed to do any social selling on at all. So we need to help ourselves there and try and create good content that we feel is relevant for a big part of the audience that we push it out to. Finally, if you want to work successfully as a rock star, or if you want more people in your sales department to really succeed with this, you need to get support from marketing. Because if you don't get that support, it's going to be really hard long term and at scale to find good insights around content. Marketing have good copywriters most of the time that could help you. They could ghost write articles with you, or they could at least act as editors that give you feedback so that the content that you publish is good. And also, if you consider video production, which we haven't discussed in this webinar, video content is growing immensely quickly, both on LinkedIn and on internet in general. And we can everyone has a phone that can shoot video nowadays. So you can do it on your own, but if you want it to look professional, and especially if you want it to sound good, you need someone in your marketing department or an external agency who can mic you up, who can help you hold the camera, who can help you with graphics afterwards to make sure that it all looks good. So try and collaborate between sales and marketing to get this to happen. But remember also that social selling should never be an initiative that is owned by marketing. It could come from marketing, but it needs to be owned by sales and the salespeople themselves, because it's a different way of working, and it's not going to happen if it's something that's only pushed on them from the side or from the top. So you need to collaborate, but need to make sales own the process. Right, I think we are with that out of time and out of slides. So again, 30 minutes goes by quickly. This is a subject that is very broad that we could discuss for hours and hours. Again, going back to the beginning, it's not a quick fix. It's not a simple hack that you can learn in 30 minutes and then start bringing in results. So I hope this is a good start for you to see how you can accomplish social selling long term. Again, we are out of time, so you can leave now if you want to, but you can also stick around if you have any questions that you want answered. And after this, tomorrow or on Friday, you're going to get a recording as well of this. So let's see if we have any questions that have come in. I have one here. It's kind of hard to see the questions in this field, so let me see here. How do you think the tech industry is different from others in regards to social, as opposed to say social selling? I think the tech industry have always been a bit ahead of the curve compared to other industries when it comes to embracing modern ways of working with sales and marketing, adopting internet, adopting inbound marketing, and finally adopting social media as a platform for sales. The tech industry, by definition, is always working in the front of things, trying to find new and interesting things to bring to the market. So it goes with that people who work with sales in that business are often ahead of the curve in working with LinkedIn and other platforms as well. So that's why I tend to gear this towards tech people, because they are the ones who are the most interested in this. So I hope that's the answer you're looking for. Let's see if we can get something more here. Let's see, what are good benchmarks when, it's really hard to read questions here. What are good benchmarks to use to know if you're successful at social selling? Well, as I mentioned in the beginning, it's really hard to see what type of metrics you can expect to get out of this. I think, especially if you don't want to get disappointed with the results when you start with this, because again, it takes time to get any good results. You shouldn't focus too much on measuring things like how many likes you get, or how many comments you get to interact with, or how many meetings that you get with people. You should be more focused on quantity. You should be more focused on seeing if you can manage to get an article published every month, see if you can make a post every other week, and see if you can make a couple of comments on other people's posts every week, because that shows that you are doing things. And from doing those things, you will be able to learn, and you will be able to increase the quality of your work. And from that, if you do it successfully and if you do it over time, you will be able to see better interaction with your content. And if you have a good CRM in place, you should be able to set it up so that you can start to measure the source of your leads. So over time, you should also be able to see how many of your leads, how many of your meetings and proposals and clients come from interactions through social media and LinkedIn. Let's see if we had any more questions here. We are experiencing that other social media channels are not as successful in regards to B2B social selling, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, etc. Do you agree? And yes, I agree 100%. LinkedIn is, at least in the Nordics, where I operate mostly, is by far the most used platform for professionals, for people in B2B. Instagram, Facebook is still more used by people in a private fashion. Instagram is becoming more and more common for, I think, people to push internal information and use more for recruitment matters, which I think is working quite good. But for sales, LinkedIn is still the platform to use. I suppose in some regions, United States and some others, Twitter is also a viable option. But if you want to work with this, and if you want it to happen at scale in most parts of the world, LinkedIn is really the place to use and a platform to use for it. Let's see here. How is the buying behavior evolving amongst IT buyers in the Nordics and Benelux? Oh, that's a broad question. Buying behavior. Well, the trend in general, as people have been talking about for years, is of course that more and more research is made on their own using internet and usual social media before getting in touch with a salesperson. And I think that in itself is reason enough to work more with social selling, because you know that buyers expect to be able to receive interesting information from vendors. I don't think there's barely any vendors left at scale who are in the forefront of selling tech solutions, who don't work at all with content creation and, for example, inbound marketing. But I think the next step for many of them is to recognize that inbound marketing in itself and using a company page on LinkedIn, it's not enough. You need to consider making your salespeople work with social selling. You need to help them by giving them good ideas for content, or help them ghostwrite content so that they can publish it themselves. Because that personal connection, buying from a person rather than from a company, will just be more and more important on LinkedIn over time. As I mentioned before, right now it's not vital to do it, but in 5 years' time, I think it will really become that. So it is something that companies need to consider, and they need to see how they can make this happen at scale. If that's unique for the Nordics and Benelux, or if it's like that across the world, that's harder to say. The Nordics tend to be quite in the forefront when it comes to tech sales, so I think it's happening quicker here than in some other parts of the world, but it's a global phenomenon that you need to take in consideration. Right. More questions? Are there any general topics within tech that are widely engaged with that is interesting for a wide variety of industries? If so, do you have any tips on how to use these popular topics to engage with your audience? Well, looking at tech, for example, everyone is talking about digitalization or Internet of Things or subjects like that, and I think that you shouldn't really look at the most popular topics and try to just follow those, because you will be competing with so many other people who might have bigger budgets and more abilities to really push those messages out there. I think, as always, you should try and find something that could be your niche, something that really speaks to a few people. And you don't have to consider content creation to only be something that you then publish in the newsfeed. If you work in a more narrow field, or if you have something that you feel that you are more of an expert at than others, and if you make content around that, send it directly to them with an instant message on LinkedIn, or email it to them, or use it in any other way, because you don't need to compete with everyone in the big newsfeed and on topics that everyone else is already talking about. Right, and I think that was the last question that came in. Again, it's hard to see here. I missed the initial part of the recording. Will you share? Yes, we will share it. Tomorrow or on Friday, you're going to get a recording where you can see the full webinar in its entirety. So just wait for that. And I think that was the last question. I just got a thank you. That's nice. I think that was the last question. So these were some challenging questions you had. If you feel that you want to get a better answer from me, that's just something on top of my head, write to me afterwards, and I'll promise I'll give you some more information on what you were wondering about. So again, thank you all for your time. I hope it was an interesting topic to speak about. And again, if you want to learn more about it, and if you want it to happen at your company, I'd be happy to speak with you. Have a nice day.